Jim Schaefer, executive producer and host of Rip Rap, the academic book television program. My guest today is Randy Baier, and we've got a bunch of interesting books. First book I found interesting is Hitmakers, The Science of Popularity in an Age of Distraction by Derek Thompson.
Very interesting. So it's not just about music, I guess. It's about pop culture.
Well, it's all of it.
Yeah.
But what I found interesting is it addresses the fascination that people are having with our current president, Donald Trump, because he talks about the futures of hits, empire, and city-state.
Mm.
And the first sentence in chapter 12 is, we're living through an industrial revolution in attention, which I found really fascinating. In the century between the 1870s and 1970s, the United States underwent an industrial revolution in food, the invention of the refrigerator, light, the mainstream of electricity, travel, the triumph of the automobile and airplane, and even in the anatomy of homes with the modernization of gas, sewers, and running waters.
Mm-hmm.
But now we're dealing with watching cable on a giant flat screen television, or streaming music from a million-song library, or looking something up on the internet. And I thought, boy, this is really fascinating. And then he talks about the dark side of music and story,
Mm-hmm.
that behind pop culture hits can be dangerously seductive. Repetition is the God particle of music, of modern music anyway. Without it, the world might sound like a cacophonous thrum, and the right amount of repetition in writing can make a sentence sing. But in political rhetoric, these modes of repetition, like anaphora and antinomole, often dress up ugly ideas in catchy language, and this is so typical of what's been going on with Trump.
Yeah, it's the
He
sort
keeps
of the,
repeating things
yeah.
that make no sense whatsoever.
He uses that style. That's absolutely true.
National debates about important issues would be improved if more people were savvy to musical sloganeering, and pundits and commentators would be of greater service if they distinguished a great speech from a great musical rhetorical performance with vacuous or dangerous ideas at the center of it. Really hits it right on the head. And then he talks about the upside of the unfamiliar. The tension between neophilia and neophobia. Many people crave new products, ideas, and stories, provided they're just like the products, ideas, and stories that they already know. The digitalization of content has yielded a world of algorithms that theoretically serve both neophilic and neophobic self. They organize the world of songs, shows, and articles around our prior preferences, allowing us to discover only those items that are optimally new. But he even misstates the number of electoral college votes he got.
Oh, absolutely.
He keeps saying he got 306, he got 304.
Yeah.
He keeps misstating how well he did compared to other presidents.
See, the problem is that pulls out the thing I was being slightly critical, I guess, is that the opposition will spend their time nitpicking all those details, and it's either he or they, that world of misinformation, they've done their job. They've sidetracked you into saying, oh no you didn't, oh no you didn't, this is what really happened. That's what a decent journalist has to do, because it's about facts. But they go on, that's deflect, what do we call that? It's deflective politics. It's like creating a whole minefield, and they can continue to obfuscate, make a mess of the things they have power over.
Well, one
It's
of the
very
things
dangerous.
he does is he keeps trying to find a foil.
Yeah,
And now his foil is the news media.
yeah, it's
But
now.
he's gone way beyond disagreeing to where he's calling them an enemy of the American people. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, he's gone into the the National Socialism realm pretty well. But it seems like the importance of this is not just it's not just timely because we have what at least the left and I hope most opposition sooner or later. I mean, the president is claiming popularity where he might not have it, and there's a major amount of resistance to his worldview. But the book is pretty timely, it seems, because it's kind of almost reminds me a bit about Hannah Arendt's books about how the authoritarian and totalitarian mindset can actually take over one step at a time, and how, in this case, popularity or constant repetition of something makes you so familiar that you think that's the way it is, and that it becomes the new normal, so to speak, to quote a term that's.
This is the first book where someone's starting to put a finger on the dynamics of what's going on.
Yeah.
And it is foreign. I mean, it is unusual.
We can look at pop culture events such as the Grammys, the Academy Awards, major prizes, and then I don't know. I could probably think of a few other things. What gold records or platinum records? These things where something else carries the day, and somebody may be given an award. I mean, several years ago, it was completely controversial. There were fine actors of color in wonderful movies. Nobody getting any recognition that one particular year, because there was another, groundswell of support in another direction due to the makeup of the people, passing judgment.
Well, another dynamic this guy's noticed is the paradox of scale. He says, soon after the surprising popular debut of American Graffiti, George Lucas told an interviewer he was working on a Western set in outer space. Don't worry, Lucas said, 10-year-old boys will love it. And he asks, is it meaningful that the most significant secular myth of the 20th century was designed to appeal to fifth grade boys?
Yeah, he's talking about Star Wars.
Yeah.
And, well, isn't that true of even written text? Isn't that true of what the basic way of messaging is to look at a 5th to 8th grade kind of knowledge of language?
But more importantly, he says the paradox of scale is that the biggest hits are often designed for a small, well-defined group of people.
Mm-hmm.
And that certainly is what got Trump elected, is there's a small, well-defined group of people.
Mm-hmm.
Star Wars was for children of magical age. Facebook was intentionally designed to appeal to the friends of Harvard undergrads, not to connect to the whole world.
So he must have a formula in those 500 pages that says, here's where it turns the corner. Here's where it reaches what they call the tipping point, or something of that kind of magic where it goes viral, or it goes popular in a certain way. And
Well, he
American
says
Graffiti certainly did that.
people are more likely to talk about products and ideas they feel unusually attached to. High school cliques, California cults, ideological clusters are all defined by their differences from an outward mainstream. These groups have existed for a long time, but a digitally connected world of commerce means it's easier to profit from cultish hits.
Yeah, that's true. That's the long tail, I suppose. I mean, this is why, in a way, used bookstores have come into their own on the internet now, because they're able to market things that they never had the visibility before, in some ways.
And then he talks about the genius of Maya, M-A-Y-A. Have you heard of that? He talks about music for a more advanced species. Is Maya. And that's how this one band got to be really popular, is because that's how they designed their music.
Hmm.
But another point that this author brings out is how far technology has come and so fast. There were no printed books in 1400.
Mm-hmm.
There were no modern public museums in 1700.
Mm-hmm.
There were no Nickelodeon movie theaters in 1900. No radio news programs before 1920. No color television before 1950. And no Facebook, Twitter, or Snapchat in
Before
2000.
2000, yeah.
This is a ragtag group of institutions, publications, and applications. But they're all inheritors of a common tradition, which is the democratized distribution of information and entertainment.
Mm.
So there's this dynamic that he's putting his finger on that really is quite interesting, that Trump represents, I guess. That, the landscape of pop culture is geologically active and forever growing. And new ideas are slipping over the folded plate boundaries of old technologies. And then he's got all the different technologies. And several years ago, McKinsey published an estimate of time spent consuming messages since the start of the 20th century. In 1900, messages came through just a few channels. People read pulp, books and newspapers, but most communication was face-to-face. In the next century, households fell in love with the radio set, the television set, their computers, and their mobile devices. Theoretically, the most important boundary for media is time. There are just 24 hours in a day.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
For each new generation spends more hours talking, reading, watching, listening. It is tempting to always see technological change as an agent of cultural death. In 1906, John Philip Sousa predicted the invention of the phonograph and records would obliterate song composition and music education in America. Sousa, a white man, did not foresee that cheap music technology would give black Americans like Aretha Franklin and NWA a global microphone, or that a collective audience the size of 1,000 concert halls would hear the recordings of his Stars and Stripes forever.
Mm-hmm.
So this dynamic it's almost difficult to even comprehend what he's talking about.
Aretha Franklin recorded Respect 50 years ago this week.
And she's not going to tour anymore.
She arranged it herself. But, these are sort of truisms in a way, but what he's writing about, there must have been comparable things to the popularity, the tipping point of popularity that he's addressing due to the significant speed of communication now, because it's true, the niche market, if you will, or the niche location of something is totally enhanced. It's an affordance of technology of today. It enhances the capability of knowing about something. So you can have, people market, it's extremely commercial. The commercial world has benefited enormously from this, from the used bookstores who can now offer, unique materials because they can communicate with thousands of people instead of just the people who get their mailings or come into their store. But I would think that, back in the day when everybody had pianos in their house and there was no even before recorded music, there were hits of the day, popular things that everyone sort of had to know in the parlor when middle class society was developing, or it wasn't just because there were, I guess I'm trying to say there were parallel growths of radio, for instance, in different ethnic communities, not just mainstream quote unquote mainstream white mainstream music supported by, you know, white businesses and whatnot. There's quite a long history of minority or ethnic recording and radio going sort of side by side, mainstream radio, although I mean, struggling to have a voice, but finding voices, you know, like South Texas broadcasting across the border with Mexico, and, you know, Tex-Mex music growing through a radio that most people never knew about. I mean, the people in New York City, you know, CBS, New York City, jazz bands, you know, whatever, all that national music, which was very popular, but
Well, that's what
here
you're
you've
trying
got
to
a
look
small
at.
niche market in radio in southern Texas that actually builds around that community.
But that's what he's trying to touch on, is the distribution factor.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when he talks about empire and city-state.
Yeah.
An example of an empire is Walt Disney Company.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Because it's a power distributed across the diverse set of global properties. You know, Star Wars, Marvel Comics, Pixar, ESPN, ABC, A&E, Hulu. It owns 8 of the 10 most popular amusement parks in the world.
Absolutely.
You know, it's,
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm not trying to bash his thesis at all. I think I'm trying to enhance it or kind
no, I think
talk-
you're on
you
the
know,
right line,
talk of
which
it,
is
flesh it out a little.
how did this grow? And that's what I found fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that this is one of the first books I read. And he talks about how did Walt Disney grow his empire, and one of them was a man named Kamen, or Herman Samuel Kosminski from Baltimore,
Uh-huh.
who was the youngest of 4 children in a Jewish family immigrated from Russia.
Mm-hmm.
He was the one that started, you know, working on the Mickey Mouse cartoon thing, and how to sell Mickey Mouse. When you look at the different ways that Disney has, you know, gone into overdrive, one episode called Operation Undersea became 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, you know, and that became really popular.
Mm-hmm.
So there's all these different factors in how Disney expanded its empire. And I just found that really fascinating in terms of distribution of the concept. You know, that they could take something like that and deal it out. But
We have it today in the media with the way something as simple as a book review or a news story will be. There's like this instant ecology of news stories. If you really listen, we have it today in the media with the way something as simple as a book review or a news story will be. There's like this instant ecology of news stories, and if you really listen to a lot of different outlets, you know, even the quote unquote liberal news media, the AM news media, the sort of instant broadcast news, like the things you just hear on commercial FM channels, television stations, NPR, they have a circle of news items that go on and on and on. And it's interesting. There's not a lot of breakout. It's not like you find a lot of the stories that are sort of underneath it all that are coming out. There's a repeat going on. I think it's that kind of repetition that makes you get a sense that okay, this is what's actually going on in the world right now.
this dynamics of how things are spread. One of the points he makes is that could hundreds of millions of people around the world hum Bill Haley's Rock Around the Clock if not for the music taste of a California 5th grader, Peter Ford?
Okay, what's the link there?
Peter Ford was the guy who helped him. There'd be no 50 Shades without a fan fiction network.
Mm-hmm.
Joanne Johannes Brahms' lullaby, was because of a lineage of German Americans
Yeah.
whose ancestors fled Europe at the right time.
Yes, yeah.
So there's,
And likewise with I Dream of Jeannie, with the light brown hair.
it says, from ancient lullabies to modern memes, new hits serve old purposes. To fill the time, to familiarize the strange, to estrange the familiar, to infect with emotion, to create meaning. What's different today is the means, the ability of small players to amass large audiences, and the power of large companies like Disney to achieve global omniscience.
Mm-hmm.
So I found this a really interesting thing, or as he says, magic sprinkle dust.
Magic sprinkle dust.
But we need to take a look at these dynamics on how things become popular in our time.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, each blockbuster has a secret history of power, influence, dark broadcasters, and passionate cults that turn new products into cultural phenomena. And I think it's useful to take a look at the dynamics with that, to uncover the hidden psychology of why we like what we like, and reveal the economics of cultural markets that invisibly shape our lives.
You're reminding me of the scene in The Devil Wears Prada. You're reminding me of the scene in The Devil Wears Prada, where I guess it's the term is ingenue. The young new hireling makes a comment about a snicker about the comment about a blue belt, and she just says it's just a blue belt. It's blues, and Meryl Streep's character, the leader of the fashion house, says blue is not blue. You want to know why you're wearing blue right now? 3 years ago, people got together and decided what the color was good. There's a whole rap. She says, so when you see this, and you say, oh, that's going to fit me just nice, you were totally controlled by that. We decided 3 years ago, in the whole fashion industry, what the colors were going to be, what the palettes were going to be, the clothing around the world, the fabric places in Bangladesh are now making plaids or whatever. So you don't have any say in it. You're seeing what you think is yours, but it's actually from some other kind of. I mean, talk about hegemony. It's really a great script in that little scene.
And that whole thing about how culture happens and why things become popular, it's not so easy to figure out. So I think this.
It's true. What's really cool is to find the accidental things that break the mold there, that happen maybe as a result of some moment, but it's not a moment that's been controlled necessarily. I don't know what those spots in history would be, spontaneous revolutions, just destroying the Berlin Wall, I don't know, or, anarchic
I think also,
outbursts, I'm not sure.
As events evolve and dynamics evolve, there's another kind of energy that comes out that people couldn't necessarily predict. The people who are shaping the culture might have an idea of what might happen, but even they don't know how much power there is in that.
Yeah.
So it's a fascinating thing.
Yeah. Why something catches on? Yeah.
So we've got another book there with Native American photographer Horace Pulo.
I've come across this book. Actually, ordered it for our university library. Photographer Horace Pulo, photographer of American Indian modernity. This is the first time I've actually held the book. I just scan reviews and say, oh, we need to know this book and we need to know this person's work. I'll just read from the back, the blurbs on the back, because I can't speak authoritatively about the book. Pulo's photographs and Smith's narration, narrated by Laura E. Smith, of where they fit in the Kiowa story, in part a welcome perspective on Kiowa history and culture. Smith powerfully illustrates how, when viewed through the eyes of Pulo, Kiowa people, like other Americans, are actively negotiating present and future identities in a rapidly globalizing world.
But what's fascinating about this to me is, first of all, he's Native American. From his family's in Oklahoma.
Yeah, yeah.
But it was this whole idea of taking the technology of photography to explore his own culture.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting, and they make the point in that in the book, he didn't use Polaroids or Instamatics. He used formal cameras to make a really good image.
In long exposures, I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that you control.
Wasn't like a brownie life.
But the whole thing is a Native American using this kind of technology. I mean, before that, Native Americans, the stories were how you pass the history along.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have a Native American use the technology of photography to establish history and use that to pass along the cultural. I found that really fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and you know, and the question comes up: why did he do it, and how did he do it, and all those questions. But it's really fascinating.
I'm just going through some of the imagery that's here, and he was involved in World War II, and of course there was much interest and information about documenting Native American contributions to World War II. But it's some interesting pictures. What's interesting is that I think he might be playing on a lot of stereotypes in a sense, but at the same time, serious stereotypes kind of interest me. If you there's a picture of Pula, a self-image in here, maybe of his brother, I guess, of his brother dressed in a complete headdress, bare-chested, regalia or wristbands and decorations, which are markers of power in their daily life, or what's the phrase? To the Kiowa themselves is what I'm trying to say. There's a picture here also of two people, aerial photographers, in training in a bomber training in the States, dressed with warrior headdresses in this. And so it's interesting because on one hand he's taking what becomes like the symbol, of the Native American warrior chief, but these guys are in the military. I mean, they're warriors themselves. So it's kind of an interesting photographic internalization of kind of both things at the same time.